everyone, as you are arriving. Welcome, welcome. We're going to get started in just a minute, literally. I hope everyone's enjoying the e-reunion as much as I am. I've watched two great sessions in between mine, and it's been fantastic. All right. Well, thank you for being here and joining with the Suddenly Single portion today. And I have to say, I watched Dr. Serene define reconciliation, and I do feel very much that way. I am so grateful to be here with you all and so sad for all of us, all in that same moment. So having those two facts that are opposing existing at the same time. As you can see, I was once served by Inheritance of Hope. My late husband, Keith, is pictured here. And so I always like to dedicate my health and wealth and widow presentations to him. And I cannot speak highly enough of Inheritance of Hope. I know that you guys are all here probably for the same reason, is that you just felt so grateful to be a participant. And I know for me, in our walk with caregiving and the terminal disease process, that Inheritance of Hope really helps set a guideline and set the tone of our walk together. And so I really felt good about some of the choices that I had made. I am a certified financial planner, and I started my CFP courses, 10 years ago. I started in February of 2010. I signed up for my first course, and I quickly put that on the back burner because Keith was diagnosed with ALS in April of 2010. And so I prioritized my role as wife and mother over my career. And then later on, I got to revisit that process and really delve in with my career with a new set of empathy and knowing that I understand the other side of love. And the other thing I always like to say too is that a lot of that reconciliation and having those two opposing forces that happen in the same time, I feel like a lot of my joy and my happiness comes with tears. And so I'm sure you guys can relate to just giving yourself some grace and acknowledging those emotions. So that said, we're going to start today with a talk and a deep dive into what's going on emotionally with grief. And a lot of times the emotions surrounding grief are people's aversion to money. So sometimes those negative feelings that we have about value system for money comes just at the same time and sounds a lot like grief as well. So be gentle, be kind to yourself. I'm sure you'll have a lot of tips and things that'll mull over, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So the first place where I really like to talk to is understanding your emotions and being self-aware. I know for me, in the first year of loss, I was in such deep grief that all I could say is that I was in shock. We had a time period where you thought you could imagine what it was like to be a widow or a widower because we had practiced that for so long in a walk with terminal illness. But the reality is you really cannot imagine. For me, I call it an identity crisis. When I first became widowed, I was unfamiliar with everything that I was feeling. I felt bombarded with so many feelings. I didn't have the words or vocabulary to discuss or express what was going on with me because I really didn't even know who I was anymore. I was still in there. But I realized about a year later, after reading a book called The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion, that her book, recounting her first year as a widow, was a book about grief. But I had such blinders on that when someone asked me, well, what was the book about? I responded, that book was about shock, because that's what I saw. I saw her in shock, and how she tried to negotiate with God or reposition going back in time and trying to change things. And so processing becomes something that is quite difficult. If you don't know what's going on with you, you don't know who you are, this is not the best time to be making decisions, right? This isn't us at our best decision-making ability. But the reality is you are likely going to have a lot of decisions to make. And so how I felt with my emotions at the time was that I didn't have a vocabulary for it. And so today we're going to go through vocabulary not only about emotions, but also vocabulary about finances. Okay, money for a lot of people can be very emotional. So this is kind of an overview of what we're going to talk about today. Aversion, most of us think if it just goes away, we'll be okay. And that is not the case. We're going to see how aversion can be harmful, although it can be helpful in some ways. And also having a sense of urgency, the extra stress that we might put on ourselves. Cash, what do you tell yourself about cash? How do you feel as far as security goes? And that it's okay to not know what to do for now. And we will get smarter with our intentions. So being intentional. And then just 3 steps to financial awareness. Okay. I do want to take just a quick pause because there may be some fresh widows here. And so I really like to tell our fresh widows, give them some tips and some tools and resources. So the things that you ought to be considering right now, things to do immediately, and I'm looking at the right side of this slide, and that's called the Social Security office, okay? Also get in contact with any life insurance policies you have, contact your state attorney, and contact your financial advisor. I would not, for now, contact the banks because that could impede movement of money. Unless your accounts are joint, they could be locked. And also don't pay your bills without legal consultation. Medical bills can often be negotiated, and credit cards that are in your late spouse's name only can also be negotiated and possibly not get paid at all. You will not owe those funds. Okay. So a lot of people want to avoid probate, and I like to kind of take a different approach to that and just say probate lets you know what we do here is important. What we do here on the planet in life is important. And there is a process for closing out the choices that we've made for ourselves. I also, for myself, my perspective was that Keith not only existed, but the process of closing out his estate and the things that we've done for ourselves was part of my healing. It let me know that I could still do something, that I had action items to take. I know that might sound a bit Pollyanna because sometimes it doesn't feel good to make the calls to say that your spouse had passed away. But it is part of the process. And I do think it lets you know that you can still function in the world and follow a process. Some tips that I usually, I've bought notebooks for my friends that are newly widowed. And I always suggest they have those notebooks open and they take notes while they're on important calls. And that they always ask on an important call, what does your timeline look like? Like, when is this person going to call you back and say something has happened, an account has closed, or the paperwork was accepted, whatever it is. And then find out what their process is, because you might have to find more paperwork, or they might need something else, or there might be something else in a second step and you think that you're done. So don't let that happen to you. Don't get caught unaware. Just ask them what their timeline and process is, and then say, hey, if I don't hear from you in 3 to 5 business days, is it okay if I call you back on Tuesday? Do you have a direct extension? and take that in your notebook and write down people that you liked, maybe even write down people that weren't helpful or sensitive so you avoid them in the future. It's okay. We call it HUCA, H-U-C-A, hang up, call again. Okay, so if you have someone that's not being super pleasant to you, you can hang up, call back, it's fine. And then what I always strongly recommend, if you don't hear from them by that Tuesday, make sure you put in your calendar on your phone that you're making a call back to this person at this number on this extension, and to refer back to whatever in your notebook. Notebooks I usually buy, I pick them up at Walmart. I try and get the like the blue books we had in college, because they'll fit nicely into a purse, so I could take it anywhere with me and always have it. And I kind of just did different sections with like a sticky note for different areas of life. So if you are a fresh widow and going through this new estate process, which I can only imagine how difficult it must be given COVID and the delays in work. So I am sad for you. I am here if you'd like to talk. And there are actually companies that will help you process the estate if you feel like it's too much. Okay. And I also will tell you, it is highly likely you won't get to everything. Okay. I just a couple months ago posted on Facebook the AAA card that came in my late husband's name. So I made a phone call to AAA, excited about going on a trip, and thought I'd make a quick 5-minute phone call on a Sunday afternoon and sign up for AAA. And it turned into me finding out that Keith had put our AAA, which I didn't even know we ever had, on hold. There was a couple months left. It turned into a 40-minute long call and was followed up a week later with a letter that was in his name. So there are gut-wrenching things that will happen like that. And for me, my loss was 6 years ago, almost 7. So there will be things that you miss. The world does seem a little bit more cruel when you are fresh, but you're capable. So if you are able to navigate the red tape of the medical world, you will be able to navigate the red tape of closing an estate. So I would tell you to be your best parent, give yourself a lot of grace, a lot of time, and a lot of patience. And like I said, you can always hang up. People get disconnected all the time. It won't reflect badly on you. Oops, and it's okay because you need a break. Take it. Okay, so the next part that I wanted to go over to was most of us, we were served by inheritance of hope in our anticipation phase. I thought that I was going to go through the grieving process faster because I had anticipatory grief, because I had done all that imagining what it would be like to be a widow. And that is not the case at all. We still need a lot of time because you truly can't imagine, right? So we had the anticipation, we go through the ending phase. Again, part of the process of closing out someone's life financially is a little bit easier than what we're going through emotionally. And the emotional part is that passage. So your passage will likely look like this up and down roller coaster, right? It could be full of fear, it could be chaos, it could be euphoria, because there's so many possibilities. So you're going to have this euphoric feeling to despair, and it's going to go on for likely years. You will be in the passage phase for years. For me, it happened to be about 3.5 to 4.5 years that I felt like I finally got my sea legs into a new normal. Okay. So I hope that's not bursting anybody's bubble. And I'm sure many people, that idea of the passage taking years resonates. To a degree with COVID right now, we're all going through a passage period again. In fact, I am a co-leader for the Modern Widows Club in my community. And one of my really good friends who lost her spouse 12 years ago showed up to Modern Widows Club and said she just had not felt grief as intense as she was feeling now since John had died, since her late husband had died. And so she came for extra support. So just know, and again, for the fresh widows and the people with new losses, my heart really goes out to you. Grief it requires isolation and some alone time to begin with, but I cannot even imagine the difficulty in some grief groups being closed here locally, not being able to meet and be in support in person, but definitely take advantage of what's going on with Zoom. We have to be physically distant, but we are not socially distant. We are here for one another. And that's what I love about Inheritance of Hope, is they bring our tribe together in a commonality where we don't have to feel so alone. Okay, so back to emotions surrounding money. So aversion kind of means, it just means you're putting your head in the sand. You're not going to make any decisions and you don't want to take responsibility. You're afraid to, possibly. So you might be catastrophizing. I can't say the word right now. If you are having catastrophic thinking going on, then you might be giving yourself a pass because everything seems a little bit too scary. The really great side about not doing anything is that you're not being reactive. So that can be a good thing. However, putting your head in the sand also means that you could ignore good opportunities. You might miss deadlines. You might get forced into a situation because you no longer have choices. So aversion, you could have fees or penalties. You might be fined for things if you don't move them in a timely fashion or do things the right way. And so, well, who cares? And how does this impact your day-to-day? Well, who cares? Your future self will likely care. You might be adding more shame or guilt or even more aversion down the road to taking hold of the reins in your financial house. Okay, we get upset like, oh, I made this one mistake, and so you hang on to it forever and just say you're not good with money. It's just money. It'll be okay, but you have to start learning more about it. And because the other people who care are also your children. Your children might be dependent on your income. They might be dependent on you financially still. And I did have, in the last month, 2 different men reach out to me that are in their young 30s, both of whom are the point people. They are both only children, and they both have 66-year-old mothers that are soon to retire. One might have early onset dementia. These boys, I could tell from talking to them, boys, they're adult children. These men love their moms and they want to be there for them. And I will be meeting with one of them next week. I'm pretty excited about that, but your kids care. Your kids care now and they care about your future self too. So if not for yourself, do it for the other people that are dependent on you and also rooting for you to have the best life. We're going to address the sense of urgency. And the biggest thing about the sense of urgency is it a sense? Is the action item that you're putting on your plate real or artificial? Okay. A real sense of urgency means that something is timely. It likely has a deadline involved. Otherwise, you're probably putting undue pressure on yourself. Artificial urgency is not good at all. It will actually create times where you will forget what is important because you feel like you just have to do something. And if you feel like you just have to do something, are you doing it with the right purpose, with the right heart, with the right thoughts? And so sometimes that sense of urgency doesn't lead to good decisions. You don't see the tree in the forest. You don't even see the forest anymore. In fact, you might be lighting the entire forest on fire, right? And the other side, if it is a real sense of urgency and there is a timeline to making a lump sum or an annuity decision. That can be a very powerful motivator to get involved in your finances too. So really try and think about, okay, I feel like I really need to get this done. Do you? Do you really? Because if you don't, the next portion here is about stress. You're adding undue stress onto your plate. And what happens with undue stress? Well, your cortisol shoots up. You have that fight or flight feeling. You have sleepless nights again. And this could be about a myriad of topics, but we're talking about having some sort of control in your finances, and you don't have to have sleeplessness over money. You have to jump in despite your emotions and figure out how to prioritize what's going on. I also put down here at the bottom, money values in history. Do you have a sense of scarcity or do you have a sense of abundance? What were your parents like? What was your late spouse like with managing money? And how do you feel about that? So having priorities and having goals will really help that, even if your goals aren't for yourself right now, if they're for putting your kids through college or maybe having some money for a future wedding or a grandchildren trip or more legacy trips. Those are very, very valid and good goals. Okay, one of the hardest things that I hear from professionals, from widows and widowers, talking to other widows and widowers, and from all the other well-intended, is they will offer this great piece of advice to not make any major decisions for a year. And that frustrates me. It frustrates me because, as I said here on the slide in the middle, sometimes deciding what's for dinner that night just seems like this astronomically huge decision because somebody's relying on you or it seems impossible to feed yourself. And that's what grief feels like. It just, you feel so stuck and everything seems like a big decision. The other thing too, I'm going to revert back to the top. I'm completely jumping around on the screen here. I apologize, but there's a lot of big lies, what I call it, that we tell about money, like congratulations, you've been approved, whether that's a credit card or mortgage statements. We are being marketed to, right? Marketing is tools, whether it's commercials or Facebook ads, pop-ups come. Sometimes we subscribe to newsletters that have offers, and all we buy into literally shopping, right? So marketing is a company trying to earn your money, okay? And then we have our own self-talk. So how we justify spending money to ourselves can be healthy or unhealthy. So saying things like Brene Brown always says, don't use words like deserve, right? You deserve this. No, you should earn it, right? You don't deserve these things. I need this. Well, we need food, we need shelter. Do we need a new pair of shoes? Maybe the answer is yes. Maybe we have kids that have just gone from like size 3 to 3.5, which they seem to do right after you buy the last pair of shoes. And then also, I think one of the things that hurts us as in grief is projecting our grief onto our children and thinking that they have suffered so much already that we forget to continue to teach them the good life lessons of earning things. So we might try and pacify them by trying to make their lives easier or better, and we might be overspending doing so. Okay. All right, so back to not making any major decisions for a year. Well, things are not going to retitle themselves unless they were owned jointly. Your bank isn't going to say, hey, here, have a line of credit unless you apply for it. Your mortgage broker, they're going to say you can afford this amount, and your attorney doesn't read your mind and pick out your new point people for you when your spouse passes away. And the IRS doesn't say, don't worry about it, we'll give you a year off. No, the world does not slow down because you've lost your spouse. And I know that is such a harsh reality, but it troubles me to no end that people tell us not to make any major decisions for a year. A lot of us can't afford not to. we're making a lot of major decisions. So now we need to figure out, well, do I have enough? Do I have enough? And what does that mean? All right. Oh, you can see this is pink. I threw this in here at the last minute. This is how much it bothers me to have people say we're not going to make major decisions this year. Susie Orman, I was watching. This is completely from a different presentation, as you can tell by the colors, that was geared for women. Susie Orman, in a grief presentation back in April or May, had actually said, don't make any major decisions for a year. I get the gist of the intent. When you're stressed out, you're not making the best decisions, so it's not a good time to make big decisions. But what isn't a big decision? So, or what is? What if you can't afford to spend the next year in the family home? That's a decision, if you put it off, will hurt you even worse in the long run. So I loved, again, Dr. Serene used the Helen Keller quote that going, best way out is going through. And this is very similar. The best action is the best action to take is to go ahead and walk through the fears that you have, because otherwise it could be a sleep disruptor. You might have undue stress that's really actually not that bad. And you also need to have a pulse point on what's going on, because as we all know, life can change on the drop of a dime, right? Or the turn of a dime. Back to the right slideshow here. So with fear, and of course with market volatility and a presidential election and all these things going on, people have a lot of fear of investing. And so I also want to be mindful of the fact that if you're so worried and you want to be safe and secure and you want to have a whole bunch of cash, just cash on hand because all of your security has been rattled, that there are opportunity costs that come with holding too much cash. So another thing that Susie Orman had said was, don't invest any of that money for a year. It's like, there are very conservative ways to invest. And sure, a year should not make or break you by any means. And I don't mean to jump into like a financial relationship with someone until you do your research and your due diligence. But there are opportunity costs. And again, I look to your future self of, well, how much do I need? And when are you going to take charge and hold the reins? So inflation is something that we call in our industry the silent killer. That just means, if I take $1,000 and I put it in the mattress and I let it sit there for 30 years, that $1,000 does not have the same purchasing power in 30 years as it does today. I can buy an iPhone for about $1,000. In 30 years, imagine what those are going to cost. Probably like $4,000. Okay, so maybe two. Let's hope somewhere in the range of that. But it's going to be significantly more. Future costs, inflation in general is about 1.75%. And in healthcare, it's almost 5%. And in long-term care, God forbid, knock on wood, we ever need it, but without a spouse, we're likely going to have to pay for it. So that's over 5% in inflation. So who cares again? Like, who cares about all this stuff? You do. Your life expectancy, if you've made it to age 45, is 79. Okay, I don't know if there's men or women. Of course, there's a little bit of a skewed difference. But if you've made it thus far, it is highly likely you're going to live to be age 79. You need the compounding interest of the market. So, and life doesn't always go as planned. We make a plan though. And again, understanding your finances means that you can regroup a little bit more easily. You can change courses a little bit more smoothly. You can go ahead and express your concerns and kind of have the plan B planned out for if life serves us another catastrophe. Okay. All right, so Do It Afraid. I just found out this is a book. Joyce, I can't remember the name of the minister. Anyway, fear is a good motivator, right? So we've got to tackle and we've got to walk through fear. And actually, some of the best decisions I've made for myself have been while I'm afraid. And one of the best decisions I ever made for myself was opening my own firm. It still scares me sometimes, but also fear and excitement, man, they kind of feel the same. So start thinking about what you're trying to avoid and face that. Express to someone what your concerns are. There might be a good, smart resolution to that. So fear, change it around and let it be your motivator, not something that prohibits, but something that motivates. What are you afraid of? Are you afraid you'll run out of money? Did you really just not want to know? You really don't want to know about your budget because it's too bad? The news is too bad? Or are you afraid you'll enable your children? If you are overspending on your kids, how do they value money? How will they understand that they need to make it on their own too? All right. And then also understand too, if you are overspending on your children, I bring this up all the time because I will tell you I am guilty of this, especially in that first year of just trying to compensate financially and buy things because I, again, couldn't have those hard conversations that once seemed so easy when I was having them with my husband or at the family dinner table and my husband was there too. So having hard conversations wasn't strange, but when you're unfamiliar with yourself, for me, it became a little bit more difficult. And so just do know you could be helping your children at your own peril, right? You can put yourself in a bad financial situation if you're overspending on your kids, but you're also probably at their peril as well, not teaching them the good life lessons. All right, so we're going to get into the 3 steps of betterment, which is budgeting, organizing your financial household, and then how to hire a financial professional. And so I just want to break real quick and see if, Christy, if there were any questions or comments in the chat that you would like to share with me. If anyone does have any questions, feel free to ask.
There are no current questions. Joe had a question before that went to, I think, accidentally the panelists. He had a comment that to contact Social Security, something about they'll pay $255. I guess maybe that was about an initial call.
Mm-hmm. So when you contact Social Security, there's a lump sum, which is very small. It's $255 that you get when someone passes away. And there's also the possibility of survivor benefits. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Okay, so right before we dive in, we're going to quick recap a little bit about the life stages and emotions surrounding money. All right, stress and grief. There is no disputing what we've gone through is the most stressful life event. I know a lot of people who get frustrated when people compare being widowed to being a divorcee. I will tell you it's the closest thing to death. Okay, so on the Holmes-Ray stress scale, the #1 most stressful life event is death, and the #2 most stressful life event is divorce. These are both the loss of your marriage, and it takes years to go through that transition, right? We talk about when the 2 become 1 when we get married. Well, what happens on the other side when the 2 become 1? There's a years-long adjustment phase. I try and always just love people anyway. Sure, being a widow is way different than being a divorcee. I get that, but at the same token, from a stress and a grief standpoint, give people grace. Just give them grace. Aversion, we've talked about this too. Okay, so the bad side is it hurts everyone in your care. You might ignore or eliminate good opportunities. Okay. So that sense of urgency, remember to ask yourself if it's real or if it's artificial. And then I'm ending with ruminating. Ruminating is when you just keep mulling it over like, yeah, Megan, it sounds like a good idea to get my finances in order. Well, thinking about it is not the same as doing it. So Make sure that you're thinking more along the lines of do it afraid if you're afraid of it, and start taking charge. Okay. Ruminating is extraordinarily, right, repetitive. It's something that won't go away. It keeps coming up. You keep thinking about it. It's very unproductive, and can lead to more negativity about whatever it is you're mulling over and not making a decision on. Okay. Some other things I call peace preventers. These are the things that pop up in people's heads that I've heard about, read about, and certainly have experienced in my business. People feel like they can't afford it. Well, what is it? Like, I can't afford the yachts out here where I'm looking in Morehead City. I really can't. But I don't even really want to. It's not my goal. I don't have enough money to invest. Okay, so it feels very prestigious. No, you probably got your feet wet in investments through retirement accounts. Everyone should be doing that. In fact, if you do have kids that are earning a paycheck and have income, I would highly recommend they get a Roth IRA. As soon as you have earned income, you should be saving for your retirement. Retirement accounts are set up to just kind of drip money in, and it's got so many financial principles. So no, it's for the everyday person. Well, what happens if you don't want to invest? Why not? Otherwise, inflation's going to catch you. If you feel like you don't understand anything about money, it's time to start learning. Financial literacy is step one. Finding out about your financial values is step two. And then getting to financial well-being is step three. So congratulations and thank you for being here. You're at step one. Let's learn a little bit more. Another thing that I hear often is people don't want to talk about money. It's taboo or it's gauche. That means it's just, it's too crude to talk about. We don't talk about what people make. And that's changing. We have a lot more access to information. So I do hear people getting more engaged with topics about investments and also investing and also financial planning. So it's great. And then I will just remind everybody too that fear works both ways. When you have an abundance of money, I see a typo here. When there's an abundance of money, it feels like you have a lot of responsibility and you're not sure how to handle the money. When you have too little and you're facing, how do I meet my basic needs? That's very scary too. All right. So when is it just right? I don't know. I'm still waiting for my own just right. I'm still waiting for that peace in everyone's, but I will tell you too, the turbulence of the market, it always feels better when you have a good coach or someone to talk to going through tough times. All right, so we want to get to confidence. We need to understand our cash flow. We have to get organized to be able to do so. And then I also wanted to talk about some of the must-haves or must-do for estate updates. And then finally, we'll close today with hiring a financial professional, how to check their credentials and who does what. So there's just some basic understanding there. In my last presentation for caregivers, I actually did not put this slide in. I can't believe it, but I almost always put the Golden Girls in every presentation that I give. And the reason why is because I want you to think about your future self, right? I've talked about this idea before. I like to think of myself somewhere between Blanche and Dorothy. So I'm a bluff. Blanche owned a home. This whole sitcom was about a woman who owned a home and she was widowed. She could not afford the home, so she put an ad out for roommates to rent rooms in her home. Dorothy is a divorcee. She moved into the home. And then also Rose, she's another widow. Okay, so these were not a group of friends living together. They became friends. And then we have Sophia. Sophia was in a nursing home that burnt down and she moved in with her daughter. So it became the four of them. So just think outside the box. And again, it goes from abundance to scarcity. I had so many people, so many women investors over the last 13 years of my career come up to me and say, Megan, I just don't want to be left on the street. I don't want to have to eat macaroni and cheese. That was my latest favorite. And I heard this over and over again from women that I Googled it, that I came up with a book that was written in the 70s called The Bag Lady Syndrome. Women are actually terrified of running out of money. We like security, right? So what does a man look for in a woman versus what does a woman look for in a man? Security is one of the things that is super important to women, and we don't want to end up on the streets. And when we feel like we don't know, it becomes a very big concern. And in fact, this was such a popular thing that Oprah actually did a show on it as well. So just think about who cares. Well, your future self cares. Name your future self, whether you're a Blanche, a Dorothy, a Rosa, or Sophia. What would she say about what you're doing if you're not facing your finances? And again, think about your children. What will they say? And being a good parent and a good role model is so important. When you show that you're able to take care of yourself, then you are empowering your children to do so as well. All right. So coach yourself up to have the courage to go through it. Think about your future self 30 or 40 years down the road, wishing we had done it sooner, right? I always tell people the best time to plan is right now. Well, the best time to plan was 20 years ago. The second best time to plan is right now. So start taking some action. And then I always like to keep it in perspective as well. So, right, we're going to coach ourselves up to get involved, but then we're also going to keep it in perspective. There was no amount of money that was going to stop ALS from taking my husband. And that is so hard to realize, that money doesn't buy happiness. Money doesn't buy health. Money is a resource and a tool for you to use. I do hear widows and widowers say that they don't like the life insurance money. Don't think of it that way. They are not here anymore providing for our income together. And this was the best planning that they can do. Life insurance money is not blood money. It's not bad. It's good planning. And if you didn't have it and you have dependent children, please make sure that you get it for yourself. And always keep in mind that money doesn't necessarily buy you what you want, but it definitely can decrease the stress along the way. One of my favorite quotes is from a financial planning book that I read, and it's true wealth is what money can't buy and death can't take away. Okay, so think about our legacy trips together, the memories that we built. No money could buy that, right? And death did not remove it. All right, so now we're getting into the actual 3 steps. The first part is having a realistic spending plan, which is just you creating your budget. All right. You need to write a budget. This is one of the best things that you can do for yourself. You have to do it. You have to understand your cash flow before we would ever know if it's a good idea for you to invest. To see if there's a surplus or to see if you are underwater will help you make a plan for your future. So try and get this done. What you want to figure out is where you are today and then what's left over, so you can deal with the reality of your situation. Always remember that budgeting is just simple math. It's addition of your income and resources, and it's subtraction, your expenses, where your money is flowing out to. It might be bills, it might be savings, it could be various things, but tracking it's very important to get a good pulse point on where you are today. If you would like to, you may email me. I have already sent 3 emails out today from my earlier session with my Excel spreadsheet that is already pre-populated with cells for you to do your budget. This spreadsheet is a template for you to use. You can change it if you want to. It helps jog your memory. It's a very comprehensive list of common personal spending and also household spending. And then how it jogs your memory, not just what you're paying for, but how often you're paying it as well. We have quarterly payments sometimes, semi-annual, like my car insurance is semi-annual, and also annual payments. So you wanted to break that down into a monthly standpoint so you don't get caught off guard every year when those annual payments come up. To get ready to do your budget, I always suggest that you have your username and passwords ready to go, your checkbook registry if you're still using one. Maybe pull your credit card statements so you can look through. I always use like Apple as an example, but I also have Netflix that hits my credit card every month. So looking at some of the subscriptions that you have is always good, good advice as well. And then also think about not just your bank statements, but also if you have anything set to auto draft. All right, what are your income and asset resources? So we can have income coming from work. You might have Social Security for your survivor's benefits. You might be old enough to claim them as your own widow's benefits. I doubt that, but you might. So one thing I want you to be mindful of too, your children's survivor benefits do not go on your taxes. Only things that have your Social Security number on it or your late spouses, which if you've already gone through that final year, you're probably done with that. Only things with your Social Security number go on your taxes. Do not claim your survivor benefits. Those are your children's. It goes through your late spouse's Social Security number, and that is not claimed as part of your household income. Well, excuse me, misspeaking. From a tax perspective, it is not part of your taxable income. Okay, so I did have a client whose daughter was collecting survivor's benefits, and thank goodness we were working together doing the financial planning, and we were able to go back all 3 years. You can only reconcile taxes for 3 years. Her husband had passed away 3 years prior, and so 3 tax returns were amended, and she got $7,000 back. Okay, so don't claim that. All right, another income resource might be a pension or annuities. You might have been asked to make a lump sum or an annuity payment decision. You could have trust payments or royalties, family support. Never overlook the possibility of grants or GoFundMe pages, family gifts. Those are all things that can help you now. And if you have any suggestions, let me know. I just got a great email from one of the participating families that they actually get a small stipend for having exchange students in their home. And that's great. I mean, just great information to share. Some of the asset resources, your investment assets, your retirement accounts, accounts maybe that you made from insurance proceeds. You can use cash value in your life insurance. Your real estate, equity in real estate, you might want to use as a resource. Any type of inheritance, business interest, or personal possessions, right? In the last group that I had told them about a train collector that I had, and I got to talk to train collectors and find out that pre-World War II trains with the tin bottoms are actually worth thousands of dollars, and the ones made afterwards that don't have the tin chassis are worth like hundreds of dollars. So it's interesting what personal possessions people have. I've had stamp collectors and coin collectors. Right now have a client who wants to sell an $18,000 Eagle coin. I mean, things that I don't know a whole lot about, but these might be things that you can turn into a resource to help stabilize your household income. I also put in here disinherited by in-laws. I have had a conversation with my father-in-law, mind you, I think it's because of the nature of what I do, that my late husband's 1/3 will be passed directly to my children. And that's fine. That's fine with me. But at the same token, it does seem a little bit strange because had he been alive, that would have been something that would have been our household resource, not given directly through the children, but would have filtered through us first. So, you know, if you're comfortable having that conversation, feel free. I think that you might want to do it as a guided conversation. Also a big mistake, especially when we are widows and widowers, is trying to leave funds to our minor children. This is not a great idea. And the reason why is unless you have a trust, and if you want to, you can build a trust, and the trust can read, my children will get 50% of what's in this trust when they're age 20, and then the other 50% when they're 25. You get to make up whatever you want to say about the trust. If you choose to do that, that's fine. What becomes a problem is giving minors a large sum of money. So if your 401k is worth $300,000 and you leave it to Jane and Joe, right? 50-50. So each child would get $150,000. What happens if they're 10 and 14? Well, the courts are not going to allow them to take possession of that money. Life insurance is not going to open a minor account, an account for minors. So anything you leave as a beneficiary title to minor children is going to end up in a custodial account. Well, who becomes the custodian of that account? Typically a court-appointed financial guardian. Unless you have something written out in your will otherwise, like a springing trust, or someone to be that point person, it is highly likely that you will be paying an attorney to make decisions that has to go in and pay for court costs to be able to access that money if your children need it while they are minors. It's costly, it's cumbersome, don't do it. Okay, so don't leave minor children as beneficiaries. If you do it through a trust. All right, and next, we've talked about income. Let's talk a little bit about expenses. This is just, where does your money go? Okay, do you pay yourself first? Meaning, are you saving some for your future self? Are you saving for your retirement? Again, arguably, you should be saving for your retirement your entire working career. The target is always 10 to 15%, but I also talk about minimums and maximums. So whatever Fidelity will let you do as a minimum, maybe $25 a month, maybe it's 50, I'm not really sure. And maximums. In an IRA, the maximum is $6,000 a year, which is great. It's easy math. Divide that by 12. That means you can do up to $500 per month, or you can just drop it in as a one-time lump sum. So do you pay yourself first? Are you saving for your future self? Are you saving for kids' colleges? What are you doing with your money? And that can be an expense. Were you the person that was responsible for the bills? That sometimes just even who pays what and what goes where can be overwhelming. So try and get on that and embrace that online system. A lot of banks are very, very friendly. Their customer service is great if you have questions or need help or guidance. The next one I put on here is, are you satisfied with your past decisions? Because give yourself permission. If you never liked the car you're driving, sell it. If you don't like living in the family home, if it's upsetting to you, sell it, buy another home. I had a divorcee who loved her boat, but realized between boat insurance and everything else, depreciating asset, and that it was cumbersome for her to try and even think about going out on the boat by herself now that she was suddenly single, and she sold the boat. So you can change some of the past decisions. The things that you feel like you've taken on as loans can be paid off. You can sell things to get those paid off. One of the worst financial decisions I ever made was Keith and I, back when our younger years, we bought a timeshare. When he passed away, I found out that they had actually, I could get out of owning a timeshare because I was a widow. So try it. Call, ask for lower interest interest rates, and those types of things. Okay, so you are not stuck with your decisions. You are not stuck with your stuff. I say that because I have actually downsized. 2 years ago, I left the family home and I moved into a condo as a new empty nester. So I got some of the equity out of my house. I truly downsized. It is a smaller space and it was less expensive. That's what I mean by truly downsized, because I definitely have a lot of retirees who plan on giving up the 3,000 square foot family home and move to a 2,000 square foot whatever, and it costs 100 grand more because they have the latest, greatest, upgraded everything. So just watch what you're changing to if the idea is getting equity out of the home. And then again, you're not stuck with your stuff. One of the hardest things that I did when I moved was throwing away Keith's dissertation from school. That was very painful. It was very tough, but it really, truly meant a lot to him and did not mean a lot to anybody else. And so in a smaller space, you have to give yourself grace, give yourself permission to let some things go. And whether it's things or expenses. All right, few tips for budgeting. Remember that budgeting is a process. It is never going to be a perfect month, right? Again, I'm preaching to the choir here that we know life changes on a dime. You might have to replace the brakes on your car. There's just a myriad of different things that come up. Be reasonable with yourself. Don't give yourself too much rope to hang yourself with, but just be reasonable about what your estimates are. So try and give yourself a lot of wiggle room inside of your budget. And that means the conservative approach means that you are rounding up on your expenses and rounding down on income, like maybe a bonus or expectations. So that's a more conservative approach if you think you're going to spend more than you will and you think you're going to earn a little bit less than you actually do. Okay. And then again, be mindful of those annual expenses or ones that are kind of a little bit just off as far as not being monthly. And then remember that you're in control. Okay. So budgeting is a process for you to understand what you're doing with your money. Okay. This is where you are now. This is how you spend your money. But it's you who is the decision maker. If you're not happy with some of the decisions, you are not stuck with them. So make the choices that you want to make, and you are at the center of your budget. The second step is getting organized. So you'll see I just copied on the right-hand side of this slide a Word document that I have that I give out to everyone when they start the financial planning process with me. This is the requested financial documents. This is the base, all of the baseline in a financial plan. It's every financial decision that you've made for yourself. So if you look at the top left, it says cash management documents. I like to look at your budget. See, line item number 1, we got to have the budget, need to know your cash flow. And then right under that is bank statements. And the reason why I want to see actual statements, because I want to see how your account is titled, and you'll see why soon. Also, your investments, your taxes, any type of 529 or education planning that you've done for yourself, all of your estate planning documents, your wills, your trusts, your powers of attorney, if you're going to be an executor for somebody else, your insurances. This is what we call risk management. The oh no, what if this happens? So any insurance that you hold for yourself. And then liability planning, that's your credit cards, auto loans, mortgage loans, any type of loans. And then finally, employment documents. There's a whole other list if you are self-employed. Okay, so if you have a benefit book, those are all your important documents. And if you don't have a filing system, I highly recommend you use this one. It's actually from the Certified Financial Planning process. These are the categories of the types of things that go into planning all of our financial decisions that we've made for ourselves. So having a system doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be too tough for you to create it. All right. So if you'd like, again, I'm happy to email you the budget. I am happy to email you the requested financial documents as well. All right. So why get organized? Well, just like organizing anything else in your life, it can decrease stress. Okay. It can make it easier for you to make better decisions, right? Okay. So you can identify where things are and have access to them quickly without being frustrated with yourself. And then again, use a filing system, whether it's paper and you're creating a filing system for you. I will say my paper is actually in a 3-ring binder that I keep. And on my computer, I literally have files that are called investments. I have a file called risk management. So, you can embrace this sheet if you would like to. And this will help you, again, get a better understanding of where you are, not just with where you are in your budget, but where you stand as far as having coverage or having investments. This is a bigger picture of the story of the decisions that you've made for yourself. All right, and this, I feel like I need to go back and redo my caregiver presentation. I definitely did not spend enough time on the estate part. So if you have not updated your estate plan after losing your spouse, you ought to do that. It should become a top priority. What ends up happening if you have no estate plan, no will, no documents, your state has a plan for you. In the state of North Carolina, what happens with your assets when you pass away is your assets go to your spouse. And then if you don't have a spouse, your assets would go to your children. If you don't have any children, your assets would go to your parents. So we always say, if you're thinking about the family tree, we look down to kids, we look up to parents, and then they start looking out for siblings. Okay, so you can have the state plan, or you ought to have an estate plan, your estate plan. Your estate plan is not written in stone. In fact, most estate attorneys will tell you every 5 to 7 years, you should revisit your estate documents. And the reason why is because legislation changes, policy changes. So estate legislation changes on average, I think it's every 7 to 12 years in North Carolina. It might be different for your state or overall, but that's why you should keep these papers, these important papers, up to date. It is not one and done. So what you do for yourself now can be temporary. You can revisit it, and will likely revisit it later. But getting at least some of your wishes expressed through the proper channels is definitely the prudent way to go. The other thing, and this is very, very harsh, if you do not have a guardian named for your dependent children, that is bad parenting. It's just, to me, unconscionable to think, what our kids have gone through losing one spouse if you have not signed somebody. And trust me, I am you and you are me. I know how hard it is to select someone to step in and care for your dependent children should something happen to you. It's hard to think about. It's hard to choose. My kids were always supposed to go to my parents. My parents lived very, very far away from me. And as the kids got older, I assigned one of our friends. And then that friend got divorced. And I'm like, oh gosh, now I'm looking at my daughter, and she's going to be a senior in high school. And so I picked another friend. Each time I had to have that conversation with the people that I had selected for her. Okay. But it's very, very important. And I had that conversation, and I consulted my daughter so she would know. Kids have a lot of anxiety. I think our children specifically have a lot of anxiety surrounding what happens if something happens to you. I called myself the last parent standing. I don't know where that grim, horrible outlook comes from, other than the fact that it's reality and it's truth. And again, we've all seen a little bit of the life unexpected from dying young is just out of the ordinary, and God forbid it happened twice to our children, right? So I'm a very, very strong proponent of having your paperwork together. What does that mean? So if you'll actually bear with me and go to the bottom, we're talking about your important documents. You should have a will or a trust. You need to appoint someone to be your executor, a trustee if you have a trust. So the executor is the person who can dot I's and cross T's, right? And and get all your assets together and follow your will to divvy the assets out. That's all an executor does. The trustee would be someone who you point to releasing funds on behalf of your children or whatever your trust says. They will follow the trust guidelines. Your guardian is the person that will actually be the person who raises your children until they are ready to be independent on their own. Powers of attorney. This is a big one. Be very, very careful with your power of attorney. Somebody who has your financial power of attorney can sell your house. You are giving them permission to completely make all transactions on your behalf. So make sure you trust them wholeheartedly. Do not pick anyone that has addiction issues, things like that. So be very careful with your power of attorney. In fact, my power of attorney will not know that they are my power of attorney unless something bad happens to me, and my attorney will let them know. Your healthcare power of attorney and living will. A living will is also called advanced directives. This is, do I want artificial hydration? Do I want a feeding tube? You know, this is the Terry Schiavo case. I was in a car accident and I'm in a coma. Should you pull the plug? You know, what do you want? What are your wishes? That is what a living will or advanced directive addresses, is how you should be treated. The healthcare power of attorney is a person that you can assign to follow your advanced directives or to be the person that interacts with the doctor to make decisions on your behalf if there's other decisions outside of the living will. Or if the odds are good, to go ahead and override your advanced directives. Healthcare powers of attorney and living wills should be done by everyone. Both of my children, within a week of turning 18, I had their healthcare power of attorney and living will. I'm fortunate in the state of North Carolina, we have state forms. So it was free. We went through the process together and they had them notarized. So that's your documents. Now, we talked about having an estate plan and the state plan. There's also an order of operations. As you likely know, having been through the estate process with your late spouse. And I always say it's to be determined, TBD, right? Order of operations is titling, how you have your asset titled. I have one bank account that I own joint with my dad. Why do I own it joint with my dad? He has no money in there. But if I were to die, that is the account that all my auto drafts come out of. So my dad's on it and he will be able to keep that account open. If it was only in my name, that account will go completely to my father. If it was only in my name, it would go to my trust. It would follow my documents, okay? The next place is beneficiaries. Life insurance, 529 accounts, annuities, retirement accounts have beneficiaries. Whomever is named as your beneficiary, those funds will go to your beneficiary. I am working with a woman who went through a pretty bad divorce years ago, and much to her surprise, when her ex-husband died, she inherited an IRA. I don't know if that was with an intention, if he had just forgotten to rename his beneficiaries, but she has an inherited IRA from her late husband. And it's upsetting to her because she didn't know it existed when she went through the divorce. So it's kind of a double whammy. Is it karma? Is it not? And that's a whole different situation other than to just make sure that you're mindful. Go through your 401, go to your 401k company, look at your IRA and make sure your late husband isn't named on it. All right, a close friend and widow friend of mine, we just retitled her beneficiaries, reassigned her beneficiaries, I shouldn't say retitled. We just reassigned her beneficiaries from her late husband who died in 2018. I was very, very surprised that she still had him listed there. But it happens, we get away from things. Finally, the third step is once you have your budget done and you're super duper organized, like, well, now what? What do I do with all of this information when I'm still not a financial person, I'm not a money person, I don't really know how these things work, you might want to consider hiring a professional. This is an entire industry, all right? Just like I know when you take money out of your retirement account, if it was a traditional retirement account, it's going to show up on your taxes. So when you pull one lever in financial planning, it often triggers a bunch of other things to happen. So working with someone, which I actually do work with someone on my financial plan, and I actually do have my trust assets managed by an investment manager that is not me. It's not me. I had read an article years ago about why does one CFP work with another CFP, and there were 3 reasons. One was he didn't have the cornerstone on all good ideas, right? 2 heads are better than 1. The second was he wanted someone to talk to his spouse because he would go into industry jargon. And the third was he wanted someone to keep him from stupid, which I just thought was hilarious. So we all think that we have these great ideas, and somebody might say, whoa, 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 you're being a little overly aggressive, or that's not the smartest way to handle things. So it's always good to have someone to talk through things with. And I do mean that for everyone, including myself. So I often tell people I personally get paid in 2 ways. I do financial planning and I do investment management. I don't manage anybody's investments without going through the financial planning process first. So what's the difference? Well, financial planning is like everything you saw on that document sheet, and it shows you how it all holistically works together. We do a SWOT analysis. You'll have strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats, okay? So if there's something that you ought to be considering, that will come out in financial planning. You can express your questions and concerns. It'll come out through the financial planning process. It's very personalized to your income, your household situation, how you feel about leaving your kids' inheritance or sending them to college or whatever your goals are. It's completely you and you at the center. So I put industry jargon over here. A lot of people talk about fiduciaries, and fiduciary means someone is, I act as a fiduciary, CFPs are fiduciaries, certified financial planner is the next one. And that means they're putting your best interest in front of their own, right? I get paid for advising. I will advise my best with my education and experience as a fiduciary with your best interest in mind before I put my pocketbook in my mind, right? Okay, so that's a fiduciary, your best interest. Certified financial planner, that's the next one. That's a gold standard in our industry. RIA, registered investment advisory. That's been a new buzzword lately. And that is the type of firm I own. I have an RIA firm. I am a CFP. Both of those things make me a fiduciary. And also fee-only advisors. That's another buzzword. Fee-only does not mean free. It just means not commissioned. Again, it takes away the incentive to not be a fiduciary, to recommend products that pay me more or pay an advisor more. Investment management, this is literally where you would go for investments, whether it's ETFs, stocks, bonds, or mutual funds, REITs, treasuries, those are real estate investment trusts. All of those go into various types of accounts. Not like your checking account at the bank does not hold GE stock, but a brokerage account would. Possibly a 529 account would likely hold mutual funds. Your retirement account might have ETFs or mutual funds or individual stocks and bonds. When you're working with an investment manager, or actually when you go through the financial planning process, a risk tolerance assessment should be done. For your account, you should have an investment policy statement, and an investment management person would help you track and monitor and also trade. So those are the 2 types of professionals. You want to look with someone that has expertise and experience. How do you find a financial planner? So if you've decided a financial plan is the right thing for you, I would highly recommend you go with the gold standard in the industry and look for the certified financial planner. And that is the website, letsmakeaplan.org. That is where you would find a CFP in your area. NAPFA, National Association of Personal Financial Advisors is another place to find financial advisors that specialize with individuals, and they're also all fee only. I am both. On the right-hand side, so what is financial planning? We've already talked about this a little bit, but it's someone who understands your experience, that wants to see what your financial circumstance is. You will typically enter a contract and start a professional relationship, and you will be paying for a financial plan. In that contract, you should understand the timeline, the process, and the cost. And I always like to just add, I just watched a webinar on this. On average, someone who's writing a holistic financial plan will spend 30 hours with that first client. Seems like a lot of time. Mainly for me, it's like 20 hours is behind the scene with your papers, and about 10 is client facing, where we're in meetings over a 1-year period. Investment management. Here are some other really great links for you to check out. You want to make sure your investment manager is official, right? Bernie Madoff was not listed on any of these sites that you see here. So do your due diligence and make sure you are not writing a check to someone who's going to put it in their own account. That's not good investing. Okay, so that'll help you avoid mistakes. The SEC on the top left, you don't want to see your financial advisor here. This will show you if there's any red flags, complaints against them. Ask the financial advisor about a red flag. They're not always warranted. Okay, just make sure that you feel like you're getting an honest answer and that it makes sense that why they would have that, or just avoid them completely. And then you do want to make sure that they're registered. So either you're going to look at the SEC or FINRA, which is another national, both of them are national, or you can call your state. All right. The goals for financial planning are personalized and they're about you. The goal for investment management is your capital making more capital. Very simple, right? Buy low, sell high. I want my money to make more money, right? So that is the goal of investment management. But you want to make sure that you have the appropriate types of investments. So we need to understand how you can tolerate risk, how you feel about the markets. Have you ever been burnt in the past by someone investing money? Have you made bad investment choices? What went wrong? Did you do it? Was your spouse, overly risky with your finances or money? So those are the types of things that you want to look towards. And always, whether it's a planner or an advisor, it's someone that you feel like you want to work with someone you feel like can explain things well and clearly and set your expectations, right? Manage your expectations. Another thing too that I spend a lot of time talking about are fees. Again, I'm a fee-only advisor. That doesn't mean I'm a free advisor. So understanding how the internal fee structures work inside of investments is very important too. All right, just in time, we have 11 minutes left. So this was your fire hose, drink from the fire hose of financial literacy, of how to get started. People write books about everything we just talked about tonight. So please let me know if you have any questions. I am happy to answer them.
So Joe is saying, if you feel pressured, you should check. Your state's insurance commission can protect you. You can file grievances with them.
Yes, yes, you can. You can actually file a complaint with your state. If someone is licensed through the SEC, if they have, you can file a complaint with FINRA as well. They take it very seriously and investigate it. I always tell people to watch those red flags too. I actually know of an advisor that has a red flag. He was picked out of, he was one of 5 top producers in B shares. They were back-end load fund shares that don't exist anymore. They were constantly being missold. And because he was in like, it was like a class action, they grouped all 5 of them together and decided to take these advisors to court that they were mis-selling this particular share class. And he did not. He had copious notes. The SEC had offered to settle with him several times for like $300,000. This gentleman, he went to West Point and he said, no, I'm not going to put my name to that. I didn't do anything wrong. And so he had 5 different firms throughout southeastern North Carolina. He only has 1 now. He spent $2 million exonerating his name, and everyone else who actually were mis-selling B shares all got off because they couldn't take them all down as a group because of him. And would you know, he still has that red flag because a complaint was made. So you can make a complaint, and then that's why I say always ask, because some of the complaints are warranted, some are not. So as you can imagine, especially as a vulnerable person that is newly widowed, you might not be making the best decisions. Somebody might really think that they're putting you in a product that is right for you. The worst I really can think of is annuities. Imagine making a decision today that you're going to need to live with for 30 years. That's what it means to buy an annuity. And I'm not saying annuities are bad. There are plenty of good ones, and there's plenty of good reasons to purchase them. But that's oftentimes, if you Google financial products like annuities, red flags will come up, like a buyer beware kind of thing. So, okay, and so I see in the chat, see.
Are you reading this, Megan, about?
Yes, I paid $1,800. So you paid $1,800 for your revocable trust. I'm not sure what you're saying about Medicaid. If you're trying to make you and your family Medicaid eligible, it's my understanding only an irrevocable trust would get you to Medicaid eligible. So if your goal is to be Medicaid eligible, then you would have to open an irrevocable trust. Again, I had an estate attorney when my husband was sick try and get us to put all of our assets into an irrevocable trust. That means I would have given up control of all of my assets. I was 35 at the time. I was 38 when Keith died. I cannot imagine not having control of my assets for the next possibly 50 or 60 years of my life. My grandmother is 96, my other one is 89. So we've got longevity on my side of the family for sure. So irrevocable trust, I would be very, very wary of. So. Yeah, so attorneys, that's the other thing too. Obviously, shameless plug for a certified financial planner. I am the person who oversees and wants to look at the way things are titled, versus when you go see an estate attorney, they will ask you for a list of your assets. They will create a trust for you. So it might be, the Inheritance of Hope Trust, dated November 14th, 2020. And you would retitle your beneficiary the Inheritance of Hope Trust, November 14th, 2020. Or you would title your account to joint hold that. Whatever, you could title your house in the name of your trust. If you have a trust, it is a new entity. All right. And so that entity needs to take ownership in titling or ownership as a beneficiary. And the trust that you build could be quite expensive. I have seen a lot of very pretty estate attorney leather binders that have unsigned documents in them, paperwork not filled out. And then I do see clients that have put together a trust and have put no assets in the trust, right? We don't actually have this box called the trust and put things inside of it. But how do we put things in the trust? we would change the titling so the trust takes ownership of whatever it is. So it's frustrating to me because I do spend so much time going through to make sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed and that everything is really working together to express your wishes. If you have a trust and then your beneficiary is your brother, but your trust says everything goes to your kids, you know, we're going to talk about that. So it is a little bit frustrating that people want to go see an attorney and think that that's the end all be all. But if you build a trust and pay $3,000 or $1,800 or $10,000 in the chat here for that trust and never do anything with it, it is very similar to flushing money down the toilet, right? You've essentially paid a whole bunch of money, but you've chosen not to do anything with it. And your estate attorney does not know that unless they set up a follow-up appointment, which I have yet to see. And I think my estate attorney is really great, but we did not have a follow-up appointment. So the other thing too, understanding estate planning is different than actually writing estate documents. So I always tell people, let's be clear, I do not write a will or a trust for you. You have to have a state certified bar, someone who has passed the bar exam to make sure that your trust or will or documents are up to date and fit that state law. That is why when you move from state to state, your documents may need to be updated or changed. Also, very clear to say too, I know a lot about accounting, but I do not file people's taxes. So it is important to have your three powerhouses working together. I would not eliminate the certified financial planner. I think there is a lot of value in what I do. In fact, I know there's a lot of value in what I do. And a lot of my clients definitely appreciate that. And I have had other widows tell me that they have spent more time with me than their estate attorney ever gave them. And it's true because they're just solving that one piece for you versus the integration of all the pieces. It is a heartache to be out on your own, for sure, Joe. It's really tough to not have that close point person. So, you know, it was hard as a new widow to figure out who was going to be my healthcare power of attorney. I also had on that slide letter of instruction. Letter of instruction are all the soft things that you can tell your kids. Letter of instruction is not a legally binding document, but you can Google it. Google letter of instruction. And that is where you would put, I referenced in my last presentation, you can put the stories of your assets, like how did that client come to get that gold eagle coin? Or my story is I have a set of pearls that I'm leaving to my niece. And I wanted to make sure she knew why I was giving them to her, because I just have such a fond memory of her and her awkward teen years, asking if she could borrow them, and she just looked so beautiful, and I wanted her to have a piece of Keith as well. And so I wrote out the story of when Keith gave those to me and all those things. So my alarm's going off. That means it's 5:30. Any other questions while I grab this alarm? What a bad idea for me to put my alarm on. All right, well, if there is nothing further, you guys, thank you so much. And Joe, thanks for the chats. I appreciate it. I hope you guys all enjoyed. I really hope to see you again. Thank you so much to Inheritance of Hope. You guys always knock the cover off the ball, and I can't wait to participate in more. We so appreciate, I think I'm speaking for all of us, all the things that Inheritance of Hope has given to us. I know from my point of view, having a peer group of people who have been in similar situations has just been super beneficial. So,
Thank you,
so much.
Megan, so much. Thanks for chatting with us today. And hopefully you guys will have some time to get into that virtual photo booth. Don't forget to make your Giving Tuesday page. Join us for game night. We still have lots more for the day and all of your retreat gatherings that'll be happening in the next hour. Thanks, you guys.
See you all soon. Thank you.